fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We're back. Pastor Johnny Kelly. What's up, brother?
Oh man, not much. Doing good. It is a beautiful, beautiful day here in Florida.
Yes.
January, low 70s. It's just, come on. I used to live up north, and I did my time. I'm glad I'm down here. It is gorgeous out here.
Ditto. Well,
yeah.
Perfect weather, but today's episode is going to be focused on the kind of the non-perfect scenario, or at least in our eyes, scenarios or events, things that happen in our lives that will happen and have happened to every one of us in some sort of fashion that maybe we don't understand. And I've got, for those of you watching, you'll be able to see this hopefully on my screen. Can you see this, Johnny?
I can see it. Yep.
For those of you listening, we'll try our best to explain what's happening on the screen. I won't go through all of them, but this was a little montage of pictures of little kids screaming like it's the end of the world, screaming in an instance where the parent is trying to protect them from something. And I'll read the first one, and let me explain it to you first in case you're listening on the podcast. So it's a mom. Her and her daughter look like they're like at Disney doing trick-or-treating, or they got Disney looking like Minnie Mouse stuff on. They got matching outfits. The daughter is screaming profusely, like it's the end of the world. She's screaming. You can see the mom's face. And if you're a parent, you know that face. It's just like, get me out of here. I want to go home and get this ridiculous outfit off. And the little quote is, I didn't let her run in the road. And this is how she's acting, right? So the mom here is protecting this girl, this little, I'm guessing a 3-year-old girl, protecting her from potentially death, from getting hit by a car. And the little child does not understand and is throwing a massive, massive fit. This next one, a little girl screaming on the floor, having a complete meltdown, temper tantrum. And the mom had just told her that she couldn't go inside the dishwasher. Kind of funny, right? And if you have kids, I know you've got a couple young ones. We've been there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. You have to constantly be like, you can't do that. I remember coming outside a few weeks ago, and my wife and my 3-year-old standing on top of my wife's minivan in our driveway. I'm like, first off, I'm impressed. How did you get up there? But secondly, holy cow, you can't do that. And he got very upset with me for making him get down.
And still didn't understand. And that's going to be the overall message. I'll go through a couple, and there's some funny ones in here. Another little boy screaming, complete meltdown. And his mom had just told him he had to stop biting the cat. This one, another kid screaming right next to a bowl of cat food. I won't let him eat the cat's food. And he is throwing a complete fit. His mom is obviously trying to protect him. She asked specifically for 2 M&Ms. I gave her 2 M&Ms. So the girl asked for 2 M&Ms. The mom gives her 2, and she's having complete meltdown because obviously at 3 or 4 can't count very well. Sean said the word green. Her little brother said the word green, and she's having a meltdown. He wants me to reattach the nails I just clipped off his feet, and this little kid is screaming profusely. Meltdown. And why I wanted to show you these is we laugh about it as adults and or parents. But at the time, these kids, they could not see why their parent was stopping them from doing what they wanted. And in their eyes, the parent was bad. They disagreed with the parent clearly. Like they're having a complete meltdown, like end of the world meltdown, because they couldn't understand why the parent was holding them back or preventing them from doing something. And what I found, you could try to argue this, but if you really look at adults, we're basically just little kids in adult bodies, right? We still want to be loved. We still want appreciation. We still want to be told how awesome we are, right? We still want that pat on the back. I mean, how many of you come home from work a little bit agitated because you put all this hard work into something, and you tell your spouse or your boyfriend, girlfriend that, man, I put all this work and I just didn't feel like I got recognized. I mean, that's the same thing a little kid would say, right? We all want recognition. We all want love. We still have those same tendencies that we had as a kid. And of course, as adults, we still want to do whatever the heck we want to. And when things don't go our way, we still tend to throw little hissy fits. We might not have the same meltdowns we have as a kid and get on the floor and start punching and screaming cabinets, although some of us might have that issue as adults. we still go through that, and there's still so many times we don't understand. And so based on all of that, here's my question to you. If our parents and us as parents are protecting our kids in things that they just cannot understand at all until maybe later when they're grown up, is there maybe a chance that God our Father is protecting us from things that we can't see? Is there maybe a chance that if there is a God up there, and then he has a plan for us, and he loves us just like we love our kids and wants to protect us, and has once again a plan for us and knows where he wants us to be and knows where we need to be, maybe, just maybe, there's some things that happen in our life that seem bad, like death, right? That seem bad, like loss of a job, like seem bad, like just, horrific things happening to our kids or our loved ones that we just cannot understand. We cannot fathom. We're mad at the world. We're mad at God. We're mad at our parents, or God, our parents, and we can't understand it until maybe later. And that's why I wanted to kick this off, because and this is not an easy one. It would be really, really tough for me to get on here without tearing up. If I had just lost one of my children or my wife or my parents. And I've obviously had some deaths in my family, like many of us, and those are never fun. But now looking back, I can see a little light in that, a glimmer of hope. I could see why that happened. I could see how that fit into God's plan. At the time, I could not. I couldn't even fathom it. But it's interesting as time goes on. Just like these little kids are gonna grow up and see these pictures and be like, "Man, I was such a fool. I can't believe I got so mad about that little thing."
It's perspective.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's perspective. It's perspective. Let's take it to fishing. If you're on a paddleboard or a kayak and you're fishing a little area and you think you know what you're doing, if you took a drone up a couple hundred feet looking down, you may not be fishing in the same spot anymore, because you may go, man, well, that my perspective has changed. You get removed from the situation a little bit, and all of a sudden you see, like, oh wait, no, that area is, it has a bunch of down trees in it, but there's an oyster bed over here to the right that I should be fishing. I need to head over that way, because you get this perspective, this depth. I think so often that we on one hand acknowledge God, and the other hand we ignore his perspective. We ignore the directions that he has for our lives. That hey, God, I'm believing in you, but why are you allowing this to happen? But it's ignoring the whole, like, he's God and he's going to understand things that we don't understand. And the Bible talks about it multiple times, about how we're not going to see things clearly here on earth right now. We're seeing them through our perspective, through our eyes. There are things, if even things that aren't like world-changing bad things, they may feel like it in the moment, but I mean, if you think back to like the worst things that you were experiencing 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you think back to these moments, you all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, at the moment it felt like your whole life hinged on it, but most of those things a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, you're like, oh wow, man, I was really freaking out for no apparent reason. Because you gain perspective on distance, but we don't allow that same perspective in relationship to God. The 1 Corinthians says, for now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know fully. Romans 11 says, oh, the depths and riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. how unsearchable are his judgments and his past beyond tracing out. Like he's so big. If he's God, then I don't want to serve a God that I understand every bit of, because then he's not really God. He's just a guy named God.
I wrote this quote down, and I think this is one of the best quotes. Anytime you say something and I write it down and I circle it, I'm going to read what you said in your words. You said, Joe, if you can understand and predict every action of God, then he isn't God. And I'm going to read that again. It's so powerful. If you can understand and predict every action of God, then he isn't God. And we've told our stories in the very first episode. I talked about going through cancer at 28 years old. I was scared to death. I had so many issues with God. Why would you let this happen to me? My life seemed like it was going great. And now it's been, 11 years? And it was one of the, if not the best things to happen to me. At the time, the worst thing that had ever happened in my life at 28 years old. And now, looking back here forward, it's literally one of the best things that happened. It gave me the courage and kind of that kick in the butt to say, life's short, go pursue your passion. Like, I left my job that inspired me to leave my job. I was like, man, life's short. I'm going to leave my job and follow what I feel like I'm called to do. Met my wife because of it, had 3 beautiful kids. I mean, you probably wouldn't be listening to this had I not had cancer. I might still be in that same old job. You shared your amazing story with Gertie and your RV and all these little things that probably were like devastating. Turned out to be one of the better things. That journey was one of the best things that happened in your life, from what I can tell.
Oh, completely. It was one of the biggest moments in my life that let me gain faith and all that stuff. But even in the momentary perspective, all those bad things happened to all of my bicycles and my RV that I was living in. If you don't understand, if you didn't listen to the first episode, that sounds insane. Go back and listen to the very first episode of Unchurched. But all those bad things happened to all this stuff. And within 2 weeks, and in the moment, it was just horrific. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I feel like my whole world is caving in. But what happened there? I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's still recording. So just say my world was caving in.
Yeah, we'll have to do a little edit there. Basically, I thought my world was caving in, and I thought everything was going horrible. But all of a sudden, like within 2 weeks, I had better bicycles. I had a better RV. Like everything was better with that perspective of time. I remember the very first job I had as an actual like pastor. I was a youth pastor in New Mexico. And so I remember taking this job, and it was in Carlsbad, New Mexico. And New Mexico's for anybody who's in New Mexico listening, I love you. The state's weird. I lived there for a few years. I'm allowed to say it. And the reason why it makes sense is that it's a state that is just a giant desert, and the towns are separated by hundreds of miles. And so I lived in a town called Carlsbad. It's where the Carlsbad Caverns were and all that stuff, And like, the nearest town is 30 miles away. And it's not like Florida, like, well, you go down the 30 miles away, but in between there's stuff. There's nothing in between. Like, nothing. You have this little enclave of people and then just desert. And then 30 miles away, there'll be a little enclave of people and then desert. And then 90 miles away, there'll be another one. Or, for me to fly back to Florida to visit my family was a 2.5-hour drive just to get to the airport. That's to go to El Paso. And so it's a town that's very separate, and not only that, but I was at a church that I went and worked at a church that was not super healthy. I didn't know that going into it, and I remember going and taking this job and being so excited. My first job as a youth pastor, and I'm a young guy at the time, and I'm just like, I'm really excited and pumped to do this thing. And I get there, and within a month, I was depressed and sad, and because I didn't have any friends there. They were pretty unfriendly to me. They weren't nice. They didn't treat me well. And it was a really unhealthy situation. The board of the church was very unhealthy. Everything was unhealthy. And I felt all alone, but I felt God saying, this is the place I put you, that you're supposed to be there. And I was sad. I was depressed. I just felt like everything was bad. I was like, this was supposed to be my first place as a pastor. It was supposed to be exciting and like the beginning of this journey, and it was horrible. Like it was horrible.
Were you doubting like your call in life?
I doubted everything. I was like, man, I'm ready to quit and just go work at Starbucks or whatever. I'm ready to quit and I want to go home. I don't want to be here. I'm unhappy. I didn't have any, like I didn't hang out with anybody for 2.5 years or whatever. I was just alone.
Just you and your cactus, huh? Hanging out.
Yeah, chilling. I had a pug. I had a little dog, a little pug dog. I was by myself. I didn't have any friends, and it wasn't like a place where I could make new friends. People were there, and it wasn't like a place that people came in and out of. It's like you're there or you're not, and that's it. It's just that, and for 2.5 years I dealt with that. I was utterly depressed. I felt completely isolated and alone while doing the work of God, which is crazy. I was doing what He called me to do. And I felt by myself, and finally, after a couple of years, felt like God finally sort of released me and said, "Hey, it's time. You can move on." And I ended up taking a job in Miami. But the perspective that I have on that is that in the moment, and for 2.5 years, it sucked. It was horrible, like absolutely horrible. I was depressed. I just felt completely by myself. But now, cut to that was 17 years later, and I'm no longer a youth pastor. I'm now the lead pastor of a church. I run the church, and I have a perspective on how to treat people that are a part of my church and how to run our church that I would have never had I not walked through that situation. That now, here 17 years later, with the church that I'm running, I can make it healthier because I know what unhealthy looks like. I know what it's like to be, whenever we have somebody new that comes on staff or is a part of the church, I know how they can feel alone and they can feel isolated, and how we need to help move them past that. And these are all things that I've learned by perspective, by distance, and understanding that the bad things in those moments, even when I was doing what God called me to do, I felt like everything was going wrong, and I questioned the calling that God had given my life. I questioned whether I made the right decision to go there, and it might. I don't want to. It might sound trivial, but like it was my whole world for 2.5 years. It was like Castaway. I was alone completely. I was depressed. I was sad. I would drive on the weekends or during the week, Thursdays and Fridays, I would drive to El Paso and like get a hotel room for 2 nights just so I would go to a movie, and so I could walk around a place that there were people. I was just utterly depressed for 2.5 years. But now I understand the good that came from it, that I learned, and I grew. I became a better leader. I became a better pastor. I became somebody who understands loneliness in a way that I never understood before, so that I can do my best to help people get past that. And so I'll get that perspective.
So God was basically using that time to prepare you and sculpt you and mold you to be a leader of your own church, which you probably couldn't even see that at the time, right? I mean, you never.
Oh no, I would have never guessed that's where I'd be, 20 years later, that I'd be doing this. But yeah, I mean, fully, like I fully believe that God was preparing me for where I'm at right now, and and we have a million stories like that. Stories of in the moment, you don't know how. It's horrible, but then you gain that perspective, that distance from it, that 30,000 foot view of what's going on, and all of a sudden you can a lot of times you can see the positives, you can see the understanding, like it's like I read in 1 Corinthians, I don't see clearly now, but then I will. I will understand, or have a better understanding, just like those kids that are screaming and crying over mom and dad doing something that they think is horrible. If you show that kid that same picture and that same caption 20 years from now, they're not going to be mad about it still, because they're going to have perspective of age and time and understanding that, oh, wait a minute, they were teaching me a lesson. Wait a minute, they were protecting me. Wait a minute, they understood that eating cat food was gross. Like they're going to gain that distance and understanding. And I think that we ignore that with God a lot. We ignore his perspective, and we accept that there's a God, but we ignore the fact that he is God and has a perspective that we don't have.
Do you know who Candace Lightner is?
Candace Lightner.
I'd be impressed if you did.
I've never heard of Candace Lightner.
1980, back in time, she had a 13-year-old daughter named Carly, and Carly got hit by a car, died. The driver was drunk, and can you imagine the feeling as a parent I don't know all the details, but to get that call or to have the police officer knock on your door and tell you that your daughter died. Your 13-year-old, princess, taken out by a drunk driver. And I can't imagine it. I can't imagine the anger and the hurt and the confusion and just God, why would you do this? And I don't know how quickly it happened, but it happened in a pretty short amount of time, where she felt, after I'm sure a lot of prayer and just asking that question, God, why did this happen? That she was called to create a movement, because she did the research on how many, especially young kids were being killed by drunk drivers every year. And she was in California, and she started a little thing in 1980 called Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD, which now is a massive national movement and saves tons of kids and makes a massive impact in the community and in the families who have lost, loved ones to drunk drivers. And now looking back, it makes sense to her, right? But I'm sure at that time it made no sense. But I mean and it's easier for me to say this now that it's made this impact, and after almost 40 years of raising millions and millions of dollars and just doing so much good in this world. But I mean, that all happened for some reason. I mean, God had a plan for this Candace to get out there. I mean, how many moms would get in front of Congress, right, and testify and raise awareness to do this? I mean, she created something that was unheard of just a couple years, prior. But God had a specific plan for her, and now tons of mothers can thank her for that.
And it's God using the negatives to make something good out of it. It's not that he created it, or it's not even that it's not even that the bad thing is something that he intended in your life. Because I don't believe it's something that he doesn't want bad things to happen in our lives. But we live in a free world where we get to make choices, and when we do that, the bad things are going to come. And it's the fact that when we have the God's perspective, all of a sudden we can go, oh, wait a minute, I see how God can use that to make a difference. I have a friend of mine named Craig Scott. Have you ever heard of Craig Scott? I'll pull the same thing.
I haven't. No,
you probably have. You probably have, actually. When I explain, I before I worked in New Mexico at that church, I was like an associate with a church in Colorado, in a town called Littleton, which is where Columbine is. Columbine High School was half a mile from the church that I worked with. Out of the 13 funerals that came out of Columbine, like 7 of them happened at the church I was at. And I moved there right after the shooting. If you remember back, there was a girl in the shooting at Columbine named Rachel Scott. Rachel Scott was the one who said, I'm a Christian, and got shot and killed. She's a martyr. She died proclaiming her belief in God. Her brother, Craig, is a world-renowned a guy who helps victims of shootings, and he was a part of the youth group. He's a lot younger than me, but he's actually going to be coming to my church here within the next couple of months to speak. Craig, if you read his story, and I've talked to him about it many times, but like him laying in the library and pretending to be dead after the friend on his right and his left had both been shot because he didn't want to die. God didn't want that to happen. He didn't want any of this to happen. But God can use those negative things to bring good. Craig now travels the world, and he gets to share his heart and share healing with the kids that are walking through these scary moments. He gets to share perspective that there is life after bad things. He's going to be down at Sandy Hook a couple of times this year. He travels to all these places. Anytime there's a shooting, they take him there because he has a perspective and understanding, and he travels the world speaking about how there is life after this, that there is healing after the pain, but also there is good things that come after it. I was telling you this story. I'll close with this story about the girl from my church. A young lady in our church, 4 kids, beautiful kids. Her husband gets arrested. Got arrested for something that he did in another state before they ever married, before they were dating, before they were together. Something that he did a long time ago that was really pretty bad.
And didn't tell her, you mean? And
didn't tell her. She had no idea about this. This happened before they were together. He did pretty bad stuff, and she is all of a sudden, she's a girl who had gone from mom and dad's house to husband's house, had never really worked, had just been mom, had been daughter and then mom, and really sort of kept under the thumb of people her whole life, and really felt like she wasn't worthy of, and didn't have the ability or the strength to handle this stuff. And then cut to a couple years ago, all of a sudden, he gets caught. He got caught from out of state. He was extradited out of state simply because he had ran to get away from what he did. She didn't know she was running. She thought they were just moving. And all of a sudden, she is alone with 4 kids in a different state. And horrible. I mean, kids crying, "Where's daddy? We don't know," and her being all alone, not having, never having a job really, other than little part-timey thingies, but never really having to work or anything. Except, no real education. It's just nothing. And I've watched over the last 2 years as this young lady has gone from scared and worried to strong, to a mom that is really helping guide her kids. Doesn't mean that everything's perfect, and they're still, going through counseling and still growing and getting past that stuff. That's not stuff that you just get past immediately. But she's becoming this strong mom that can raise kids. She's finally gotten the perspective where she goes, wait a minute, I can work. Wait a minute, I can raise these kids. Wait a minute, I can take care of them. And wait a minute, I don't need somebody who lies and treats me like that and does those things to take care of this family. That I serve a God and who gave me the ability to take care of this family. And I've watched her gain strength and knowledge and grow as a mom. Yeah, she's confident. Yeah. We helped her a few months ago with fixing up a minivan for her and the kids. And before I gave it back to her, because I did a lot of work on it to get really nice for her and the kids. And before I gave it back to her, I ordered a sticker on Amazon and put it on the back window. She didn't know I was doing that, but it's a sticker that said "Mama Bear," and she got these 4 kids, and she's Mama Bear. The strength that you never get between a kid and a bear and her cubs. Because why? Because they'll tear you up. That Mama Bear is strong and confident and ready to protect and take care of things. And I've watched her go from being this scared girl who didn't know what was going on to becoming the Mama Bear. This horrible thing that went on in her life, and all of a sudden that perspective, she's found growth and become this thing that she never expected, and the confidence that came from it was unbelievable.
Well, it's interesting. I've been listening to you, and I think you've used that word perspective, I don't know, 8 times. And I think that's really the biggest lesson here. And you also, said the word good versus bad, and I have too. And society does, right? When the news, instantly based on the headline if it's good news or bad news. 90% of the times it's bad news, but what is bad news? Right? I mean, if God's plan is perfect, like let's take the Candace Lightner, was that good? Now knowing what we know, was that good news or bad news? And I'm not going to answer that for you. That's something that you have to answer. And I met a gentleman who had lost a child as well, and it ruined their family. I mean, it tore them apart. They didn't understand it forever. And he finally, I don't know if it was a dream, it was some type of dream vision he got from God, and it became very clear that daughter, it was a daughter that he lost, was never his, it was God's. And he never thought of it that way. He was like, that was not yours. Everything you have on earth, I gave that to you. That was mine, and I needed her more than you did. And it was like, boom, he heard that, and he was like, it literally changed everything. And he went out with a better attitude that, my daughter this was a good thing. She's in heaven.
And it's that perspective. It's that perspective
100% perspective.
If you acknowledge there is a God, then when, and what was her name again? The drunk driver,
Candace.
Yeah. When her daughter died, if we acknowledge there's a God, then we need to acknowledge that there is a heaven, and that daughter didn't die. That daughter just took the next step in the journey and has moved on to the better place. And we're quick to say that after at a funeral, but a lot of times we don't let our brain and our heart understand that and acknowledge the perspective of, wait a minute, it's painful for me here because I'm still looking at it through this I'm right up on it. But the God perspective is that person is not dead, but that person is here with me, and can all of a sudden it changes everything when you look at it, when you try to put your look through the perspective of the way God looks at us and the way God treats us and the way he feels about us. It changes everything.
Yep. In heaven and on earth. And I'm writing this book right now called The Chair about my brother. And I caught myself doing this about my own brother. And it's a fictional story, kind of like a Harry Potter-esque, where, this kid in a wheelchair, my brother Daniel, based on him, finds this new world. And I started using in the book, and I had to correct myself, the word normal, like you and me are in society are considered normal. My brother in a wheelchair who can't walk or talk is considered not normal. He's considered disabled or handicapped. But I'm pretty sure in God's eyes, it might be the opposite. I've talked about it. My brother wakes up happier than 90% of people I know, including me many days, who I'm Mr. like happy-go-lucky and doing all this awesome, meditation and prayer and journaling in the morning. And there's many days that my brother who can't get out of his own bed without assistance, who's never walked or talked a day in his life, he is truly happy deep down and makes a conscious decision to say, man, I am grateful to be alive. And has every reason not to. And what is normal based on that, right? That's all about perspective. And I'm guessing when we get in heaven, he's not going to look any different than me or you, and we're all kind of the same. And yet we have that perspective that was a bad thing, where someone else can look at it and say, are you kidding me? Like, that was an amazing thing. That was God's handiwork right there. And so much it is about perspective. So I'm glad we kind of hammered that at the end.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just having the ability to look at things and say, you know what, God's got a bigger plan. And I read earlier, the depths and wonders of God. I will never understand his ways. I don't see things clearly now, but then I will. We might not understand it, but there is really great things that come out of bad situations, and God wants to use it and make a difference in our lives and in the world, and to use us through those situations.
Yep. And of course, easier said than done. And that doesn't mean that you should say all good things or all things are always good. You should never go to your friend's funeral and exclaim, "This is the best thing that's ever happened." Great news. And we're saying that in jest, obviously, because I know it's easier to get on a podcast and talk through this.
Oh, for sure.
And say, hey, it's all about perspective. But my advice to you, if you are struggling and you're still here with anything that's happened in your life or a close friend's or a loved one's life, or maybe you just never got over what it is, I would just suggest you pray. And to me, you're a pastor. I'm not. And that sounded so corny for me to pray, but I have had just so many amazing like aha moments and clarity when I wake up in the morning and just do a little quiet time. And sometimes I'll just walk in the neighborhood and no headphones, no earbuds, just looking up at the stars and praying to God, like, why is this happening? Well, why am I going through this phase? And it's amazing. Usually not right then and there, but it'll be like that night in a dream or something will happen where I understand, and all of a sudden I have understanding. So I would give that a shot, and don't be mad or confused if you don't understand why this happened right away. Sometimes it might take 20 years. It might take 5 years. It might take 5 weeks. It might take 5 hours. I don't know.
It's okay to not have the perspective yet.
Yes.
It's okay to not have the perspective yet.
Yep.
Some things suck, and you're allowed to be sad, and you're allowed to walk through those scary moments, and to allow the time to get you there. You're allowed to. That's totally fine. I mean, that's all these situations we've just talked about that we personally have gone through, we've seen people go through, in the moment did not feel okay.
Yeah.
Like they were horrible. But that perspective took time, and for some people it's quick, for some people it takes forever, some people maybe they never get that perspective this side of heaven. But and it's okay. It's okay. It's just understanding that it's not somebody playing a mean trick on you up in the heavens. It's a life that we live and that we serve a God that wants to use those things for his good, and that there's a perspective beyond ours, that there's something that's bigger. There's a bigger picture here.
Yeah. And it is really awesome what happens to your overall joy and fulfillment in life when you have that faith and you finally get it. And everyone's on their own journey. It took me a long time to get there. But man, once I did, it was just complete shift. So guys, we'll end it there. Thank you so much. All we ask in return is to share this with someone that might need to hear this right now. And then obviously subscribe and leave a review for this podcast. Helps us out tremendously. And finally, if you're anywhere in Central Florida, go visit. You got it right on your shirt. Your shirt, Discover Family Church. Yeah. Pastor Johnny he's got his own place now.
We got our own building.
Another amazing story that we talked about on the last episode about just dreaming big. If you're having a challenge about just kind of purpose in life and what's next, definitely go listen to that one as well.
Definitely. And if anybody needs you're walking through that hard time, that scary moment, you don't have that perspective yet, and you want somebody to pray with you, I'm here for you. Just email me, johnny@discoverfamilychurch.com. I'd love to pray with you. I'd love to help you.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. We will talk to you on the next episode. We out. Peace.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. So